Warning: the following story contains content that some listeners may find disturbing. This includes, but is not limited to, sexual coercion, human trafficking, and sex slavery. Listener discretion is advised. I can talk to the nearly dead in my dreams, and last night my long lost mother visited me. A Creepy Conceptions original. Artwork by Kanarushi. Part 3. A Disturbing Revelation. I can talk to the nearly dead in my dreams, and last night my long lost mother visited me. I can immediately tell when I'm about to receive a message. I'll be in a familiar place without knowing how I got there. My body will move of its own volition, and when I speak, I don't hear my own voice vibrating inside of my chest like usual. Instead, it's as if I'm hearing it in a memory. I can normally smell, feel, and even taste my surroundings. I once visited a middle aged man who was drinking cold black coffee inside of an office that was piled high with several stacks of paper. I can still taste the bitterness in the back of my throat. To this day, even the smell of coffee makes me nauseous. Jerry lived alone, and he had been hit by a car that cut through a parking lot during a high-speed chase. Jerry's message? No one knew where his dog was, and his dog would starve in his empty house if no one went to save him. Another necessary component for these people to be able to communicate with me is pain. Physical pain. They have to somehow be conscious for long enough to deliver their message, and the desperation comes partially from the amount of physical pain they are in. This part I thankfully cannot feel, but it more than comes through in their aggression. Their thoughts are often scattered, and there is always some sort of brain damage or swelling. The damage has to be sudden. The brain has to have a reason to be slightly acidic from this damage. The death itself has to be unexpected, and the person has to know they're dying. Most memories I receive from people are scattered enough not to be coherent, but I can sometimes look through their social media and photos and recognize faces, remember names, or remember the occasion. Jerry's dog, for example, was a Pomeranian named Charlie. If there are more rules, I haven't discovered them yet. I'm not sure whether these occurrences will ever change, stop, or become more powerful. I don't know if I will ever be able to control them. The fact that I feared it to the point that I hated thinking about it kept me from doing research on it at first, but when I did, I wasn't really able to find anything quite like it. When I did, the people it was happening to were just as clueless as I am. As far as I knew, no one in my family shared this ability, at least not on my mother's side. Before I tell you about my mom, I have to tell you something about my dad that will paint a picture of the type of person I know her to be. I want to emphasize that I had a healthy and wholesome upbringing. I wouldn't change the life I've had. My aunt is my mother's younger sister. Though I still call her Aunt Kelly, she has been my mother since I was a young toddler. She treats me no differently than her other children, and I usually call my biological cousins my brothers. I was a happy, safe, and well fed child. I was surrounded by love, and I was disciplined when necessary. Aunt Kelly snuck into my room at night and swapped out my baby teeth for money. She was present for every parent teacher conference, sat with me as I struggled through stoichiometry, and held me as I cried over my breakup with my first girlfriend. She put my report cards on the fridge, taught me how to drive, and bought me my first makeup set. She never made me feel like I didn't have a mom, and my dad, well, my dad never made me feel like I didn't have a dad. But as far as my biological father, well, I had no idea who he was. I couldn't have cared less, though. When my mom was 19, younger than I am right now, she had me. She had told my dad that she was pregnant. They only had a brief fling and never really dated, but my dad constantly asked for updates throughout the pregnancy. He was heartbroken when she didn't tell him I had been born before my due date until after the due dates had passed. He didn't know I'd been born until a month after my birth. His name, however, was written on the birth certificate. About a year and a half later, my dad graduated from college and went off to law school in another state. He kept in contact and always sent money to help support me. When I was old enough to pay attention, he would video call me on a daily basis. At this point, my mom was almost never home, disappearing for weeks at a time. My grandmother and my Aunt Kelly, who was 20, took care of me. My dad got a job offer during law school. Almost as soon as he began his career as a lawyer, he was contacted by my mother demanding higher child support contributions. He argued that she wasn't the one taking care of me and that he talked to me more frequently than she did. He didn't trust what she was going to do with the money that he was sending her. I was 5 and starting kindergarten, so I wasn't very aware of what happened, but it was a battle that turned ugly. He accused her of only putting his name on the birth certificate because he was in law school, and accused her of already being pregnant when they first got involved, considering I was estimated to be a few weeks older than she claimed I was, and was 8 pounds 2 ounces, a little big for being premature. A paternity test confirmed his suspicions, and he threatened to sue her for the years of lies and child support payments. He was going to have his name removed from my birth certificate, and he was never going to speak to her again. Instead, he purchased a plane ticket, showing up at my grandmother's house late that Friday. I ran up to him when I saw him, and he didn't hesitate when he picked me up, holding me tightly and telling me he loved me. I was 5 years old, and I had been his daughter for 5 years. The love, he said, couldn't be undone. He chose to keep his name on my birth certificate, and he bought me a tablet that allowed me to video chat with him whenever I wanted. Even when he was busy, he would call me every day for at least a few minutes. I would see him during the holidays, and when he had saved enough money to move out of his 2 bedroom apartment that he shared with another guy and buy his own house, he offered to have me move in with him, but specified that he wouldn't force me to do so. I declined his offer as I was beginning to find my love for dance and didn't want to leave my classes. My mother left before I finished kindergarten, and I honestly didn't miss her. She was never there to begin with. When I was with her, she always seemed to be annoyed with me. Eventually, after a blow up fight with my grandmother, she left, screaming that she never wanted a child and that she didn't want to be held down. Aunt Kelly held me in her arms as I cried, not understanding what I had done wrong. Years later, some of my classmates were picking on me at school. One of them said that my mom was a whore and that my dad wasn't my real dad. When I got home that day, I called my dad. I told him what they said and was surprised to hear him laughing.
What's this kid's name, sweetie?
Tommy.
Tommy. Huh. I think I know his parents. Do you know why Tommy said I'm not your real dad, Maddie?
No, he only used my real name when he was being serious, so I gave him my full attention.
Tommy said I'm not your real dad because he doesn't know what a real dad is. He thinks that a real dad is the guy who gives you your DNA, but that's not true. That doesn't make someone your dad. I'm your real dad because I know you love to dance. I know your favorite color is purple, and I know you think math is boring. Your favorite show is the one about the guy who turned into a llama and now he's going to school. I have a college fund for you that I deposit money in every month, and when you graduate, you'll have your college paid for. I have every drawing you have ever given me. My house and my office have pictures of you and me everywhere. When I get married, you will be my flower girl. When I have more kids, you will have more brothers and sisters. You will go on every family trip. You are the person I love the most in the whole wide world, and that will never, ever change.
He paused, and I thought I heard him sniffle. At the time, I just assumed he had a cold.
I have the number to your doctor, to your teacher, and your dance instructor, Maddie. I may not be the guy who gave you your DNA, but I am 100% your dad.
In that same regard, the woman who gave me my DNA and who gave birth to me is not my mother. She never will be, especially now that she is going to die. For several nights, I was being drawn into a room that was so unclear that it was almost like static. It hadn't been this way before, ever. But I had a feeling I knew what it was, and I was afraid to go to sleep last night. When I did, I found myself in a house, open concept, with hardwood floors and high ceilings. I walked through, for the first time not having a strong pull in any particular direction. I could feel someone wanting to reach me, but my body continued to move about aimlessly. I could see pictures propped up on a side table and started walking towards it when I woke up in my bed, the early morning light peeking in through my curtains as my alarm blared beside me. I dragged myself through my routine, feeling like I'd somehow gotten anti sleep. I was sure the dream was from someone trying to communicate, but the memory just wasn't strong enough to pull me in. I talked about it with Aunt Kelly as we sat around the breakfast table. My brothers were dressed and ready to go to school. My uncle wore a long sleeve button up with a tie and basketball shorts. After breakfast, he would retire to his home office for a long day of Zoom meetings and responding to emails. Aunt Kelly didn't have work today, but she did have periodic training sessions at the hospital, so she would be gone until 5 p.m. I was also going to dress from the waist up and attend my online classes. Throughout the day, I struggled to pay attention, making mental notes to rewatch the sessions when I felt a bit better. At around noon, I took an open book quiz on some of the previous week's material, went for a jog, and took a quick shower before sitting down to read the next chapter of my anatomy and physiology book. If you've never read one of those, just know that it takes an entire page to say what could generally be said in a sentence. I eventually found myself rereading a section about myelin sheaths and the nodes of reindeer for the third or fourth time before I decided that a nap was in order. I must have made my way over to my bed at some point, but I don't remember lying down or falling asleep before finding myself once again inside the house with the hardwood flooring, this time in the entryway. In front of me was a living room furnished with two tufted ivory couches, a traditional wooden coffee table on top of a large ivory shag rug, and a wooden TV stand that held a few consoles and a smart home hub. The TV itself was rather large and mounted to the wall. On the left was a hallway leading to what I knew would be the bedrooms, and to the right was the dining room. A chandelier glittered in the sun, shining through from the sliding glass doors on the other side of the living room. The table was oval, white oak, with 6 matching chairs. There was an opening into the kitchen, but I somehow knew that I could also move forward and go around the wall to my right beyond the dining room, where there would be a bar with 2 stools, a fireplace, and a door leading into the laundry room and a 2-car garage. I could hear the water running in the kitchen sink, and the entire house smelled like lavender cleaning products. I turned my head to my immediate left to look at the family photos that filled the frame. My eyes landed on the photo of a woman with her arms wrapped around a little girl. They were both smiling and standing in front of Cinderella's castle in one of the Disney parks. The sight of the woman, whom I immediately identified as my biological mother, made my heart stop. I said I had a happy childhood, but the feelings of hurt and betrayal still lingered from time to time. I spent my entire childhood not understanding what I had done wrong, and now that I'm an adult, I know that I didn't do anything wrong. Somehow, this didn't make it hurt any less. The water stopped in the kitchen and my heart began to beat faster. I hated the lack of control I had in these situations. Every part of me was telling me to wake up, to leave this nightmare, or to perhaps turn around and run out the front door. I hadn't even thought of the implications of what it would mean if I saw my mother in this dream. I was too busy screaming at my legs to keep from doing what they were currently doing, which was walking around the bar and directly into my mother's line of sight. I had less than a second to register that she looked healthier than she did in the pictures that were still in the house I lived in with the family she abandoned. She used to be sickly skinny, not 1 ounce of fat or muscle on her. A bag of bones, if you will. And that was all the time I had to think before she flew over the bar and knocked me to the ground, growling and screaming, her hands pulling at my hair. I struggled and screamed internally, wanting to wake up and thinking for a horrifying moment that I was the one who was going to die in this dream. My outer body just lied there, not even defending itself. I would think that I would be able to breathe in a dream, even if being strangled, but as I became lightheaded, my vision fading, I was glad that she let go, and I struggled to catch my breath. Her gaze was deranged and filled with rage, her creepy grin more than a little unhinged. I immediately realized that whoever my little sister was, she did not have a good life here. I knew what her husband looked like: older, much older, balding, emotionally abusive. I also knew there was something about a team in high school, a coach, disgust. Her growl broke me out of the memories.
They're in the basement. He keeps them there.
The coach? I asked, despising the ever present monotony in my voice.
Yes, that's where he keeps them.
Keeps what? I asked. She didn't have to answer. She gave me the memory, and I saw them. Women, thin, young, and naked. They were locked inside his basement. I automatically knew they were here on temporary visas and that they had been sent to him from somewhere in Eastern Europe. They had come to the United States on the promise of a better life. Instead, they were treated like animals, kept inside what was practically a sex dungeon, never to see the light of day. I'm not sure when I realized that I was back in my bed, eyes open, staring blankly ahead. I knew what she did. She turned, and she ran. She used the information to keep him away from her without him retaliating against her. She was under pressure. Volleyball, state championship. She needed the scholarship. The team was putting her on even more pressure. She was the star player, and my grandma couldn't afford to pay for college after her broker had put a significant portion of her funds into the dot-com bubble, nearly ruining her retirement fund. She was already 35 when she had my mom, and she was 53 when I was born. She was 2 years from retiring when she lost over 80% of her wealth. The broker vanished. I had known these things before. I knew about the dot-com crash, my mother's obsession with volleyball, and how she stopped caring after her team lost the tournament that was supposed to give her a full scholarship in her senior year, guaranteeing that she would not be recruited. I got flashes, practicing volleyball, the pressure, Grandma crying alone, outside on the porch, Grandma begging on the phone when she couldn't pay her bills, trying to find out what happened with her retirement. I felt the hatred she felt as she was used by her coach. I felt the pain. I heard the sounds. My skin crawled. She turned, ran, freed herself from him only to be so distracted that she injured her wrist in a game. The coach, afraid of her and her own stubbornness, cost the team the state championship. A wave of nausea hit me, and I grabbed the trash can near my desk, giving it my partially digested breakfast. I knew who my father was. I also knew that, instead of coming clean, my mother left those women in there. She disappeared, wanting to leave her past behind. Her biggest pain was failing at her dream. It wasn't me. It wasn't even the coach. She wasn't haunted by those women. She just didn't want to think about it. I vomited again. Now I'm sitting here at my desk, wondering how exactly I'm going to approach the police about a retired coach that kept young women in his basement over 2 decades ago. Like the judge would sign a warrant based on the dream of a 20-year-old college student. I wanted to run away from all of this information, but I didn't want to be like my mother. I didn't want to leave people to suffer. I knew that coach. He was an old man, but he was still alive and still possibly buying human beings off the internet. An impossible situation. A serial kidnapper, rapist, and probably murderer living in my neighborhood, and me without any evidence against him. My young kid sister stuck in a house with a man that barely cared for her existence. Me, unable to do anything about it, and my very existence the product of the sadistic and depraved actions of an evil man who preyed on the vulnerable. My birth from the union of the sinister and the misguided and selfish, a victim that used the force of captivity of others in the same situation to free herself and pursue a goal that fell apart when her own image of perfection shattered, and she wanted nothing to do with me. She wanted nothing. Why have me? So many questions, some that will never be answered, trying to find the words to tell someone what I saw and wondering if it would even make a difference, questioning whether I was ready to, after having my own world shattered, crush reality for the rest of my family. I sat, hating my gift and selfishly wishing that it didn't have to be me. I didn't want the responsibility. I didn't want to go through the pain. I didn't want to face the horror. But I wasn't my mother. I was determined not to be. I wouldn't let crimes go unpunished because it made me emotionally uncomfortable. I wouldn't give up on a child even if I was standing at the base of an uphill battle so steep it looked like a rock face, half-sister or not. As much as I didn't want to, I wanted even less to be like her. I picked up my phone. After one ring, a male voice greeted me.
Hey, sweetie.
Hey, Dad. I had another dream. That concludes our story. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this creepy conception of mine. Please remember to like if you like, comment, share, and subscribe. Don't forget to hit the notification button. Our next story is a prompt request, and it will be published this Tuesday, the 11th of May, and you'll want to be sure that you are notified when it comes out. Prompt requests can be sent to stories@creepyconceptions.com. Magnificent artwork can be commissioned at commissions@kanarushistudios.com. Once again, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you back here next time. As always, stay creepy, my lovelies.